The frozen fjords of ancient Norway stretch endlessly, where survival means kill or be killed. Astrid crouches behind jagged rocks, her breath forming ice crystals in the bitter air as massive wolves circle her makeshift shelter. She's been running for 3 days straight, ever since her village burned to ash and everyone she loved died screaming. The largest wolf shifts, bones cracking and reshaping until a towering man stands naked in the snow. His golden eyes lock onto hers with predatory intensity. She should be terrified, and she is, but not for the reasons he thinks. Astrid clutches the small iron pot that's all she has left, the only thing that survived the flames that destroyed everything else. "Please," she whispers, her voice barely audible. "I don't talk much, but I can cook." What she doesn't tell him is that her cooking once fed kings, that powerful men have killed for her recipes, that the spices in her pot aren't just seasoning, they're weapons she's spent years perfecting. And the reason her village burned? Someone discovered exactly who she really is. But will her greatest skill save her life or seal her fate? The man's nostrils flare as he scents the air around her. His pack remains in wolf form, yellow eyes gleaming like fallen stars against the white landscape. She can smell their hunger, not just for flesh, but for violence. These aren't ordinary wolves. The way they move, the intelligence in their gaze, the careful formation they maintain while their leader interrogates her, everything about them screams danger. "Cook?" His voice rumbles like distant thunder. Steam rises from his bare skin despite the brutal cold. "What use is a cook to me, little mouse?" Astrid's fingers tighten around her pot's worn handle. The metal has been blackened by countless fires, seasoned with secrets she's carried across 3 kingdoms. Inside, wrapped in oiled cloth, are powders and dried herbs that could heal or poison depending on her intent. Her grandmother had called it the witch's mercy, the power to decide who lived and who died with nothing more than a pinch of this, a dash of that. "I can make food from nothing," she says, forcing herself to meet his gaze. Those golden eyes hold intelligence and cruelty in equal measure. A handful of snow, some bark, whatever grows wild, I can turn it into a feast. He laughs, the sound sharp as breaking ice. "And why would I need that when I have prey running through these woods?" Behind him, one of his wolves whines softly. Astrid notices the way its ribs show through its thick coat, how its breathing seems labored. Another wolf favors its left front paw. They're hungry, yes, but more than that, they're weakened. Something has been driving them hard, keeping them from proper hunting. "Because prey runs away," she says quietly. "And from the look of your pack, you've been chasing something more dangerous than deer." His expression darkens. With inhuman speed, he closes the distance between them, crouching so they're eye to eye. This close, she can see scars crisscrossing his broad chest, some old and silver, others still pink with recent healing. Whatever hunts these hunters has claws and knows how to use them. "Clever little mouse," he murmurs. "What makes you think you understand my pack's needs?" Astrid's heart hammers against her ribs, but she holds steady. "Your wolves are favoring their wounds. They haven't eaten well in days, maybe weeks. You're running from something, not toward it. And you're considering my offer instead of simply killing me, which means you're desperate." Silence stretches between them, broken only by the wind whistling through the rocks. The wolf pack shifts restlessly, their eyes moving between their leader and her. She can feel their hunger like a physical weight. Finally, he rocks back on his heels. "One meal. Impress me, and perhaps I'll make your death quick. Disappoint me. He doesn't need to finish the threat." Astrid nods, already calculating what she can work with. Snow for water, pine needles for vitamin and flavor, maybe some bark if she can find birch. In her pot she has dried mushrooms, wild garlic powder, and other things she doesn't plan to mention. "I'll need a fire," she says. He gestures, and one of his wolves trots away, returning minutes later dragging deadfall in its massive jaws. Another scratch of his hand along a rock sends sparks flying, catching the dry tinder with supernatural precision. As flames begin to lick upward, Astrid allows herself one moment of hope. Her cooking has opened doors that armies couldn't breach, softened hearts that swords couldn't touch. If she can just remind these predators that there are pleasures beyond the hunt, maybe she'll live to see another dawn. What she doesn't know is that the Alpha's name is Ragnar Bloodclaw, that his pack has been fleeing something ancient and terrible for a fortnight, and that her offer of food has just become the most interesting thing to happen to him in over a century. The scent of roasted meat and herbs still lingered in the air when Astrid woke to find her wrists bound with iron shackles. The weight of them sent a familiar chill through her bones. Iron had always affected her strangely, making her feel sluggish and drained. She tested the bonds carefully, finding them secure but not painfully tight. She lay on a pile of furs in what appeared to be a storage room, wooden crates and barrels stacked around her like silent sentinels. Through a small window high above, pale morning light filtered in, telling her she'd slept through the night. Her stomach, mercifully, no longer cramped with hunger. The memory of rich stew and warm bread made her mouth water again, even in her current predicament. The door creaked open, and she quickly closed her eyes, feigning sleep. Heavy footsteps approached, accompanied by that same wild scent that had marked the massive man from the night before. She forced her breathing to remain steady as he drew near. "I know you're awake," his deep voice rumbled, closer than she'd expected. "Your heartbeat changed the moment I entered." Astrid's eyes snapped open, meeting his amber gaze. In the morning light she could see him more clearly, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that fell past his shoulders and a beard that couldn't quite hide a jagged scar along his jaw. He wore simple leather and wool, but everything about his bearing spoke of command. "What do you want with me?" she asked, sitting up slowly. The chains clinked softly with her movement. "That depends entirely on what you are." He crouched down, studying her face with unsettling intensity. "You appeared in my territory half dead, cook a meal that somehow satisfied an entire pack of grown wolves, and now—" he tilted his head. "Now you smell different, changed." Astrid's pulse quickened. She'd hoped the iron would mask whatever he might sense, but clearly his abilities ran deeper than she'd anticipated. "I don't know what you mean." "Don't lie to me." His voice carried a warning growl. "I can hear the deception in your voice. I am Fenris Ironwood, Alpha of the Northern Pack, and these lands are under my protection. That means anything or anyone that enters them is my responsibility." She met his stare, weighing her options. Running was impossible with the chains, and something told her that even without them, this man could track her anywhere she might flee. But the way he spoke of protection rather than conquest gave her a thread of hope. "I'm no threat to you or your people," she said carefully. "I seek only shelter until I can move on." "That meal you prepared, it was more than simple cooking." Fenris rose to his full height, towering over her. "My pack hasn't been that content, that peaceful in months. What did you do to the food?" Astrid's mind raced. She'd been careful, adding only the most basic of her abilities to ensure the meat cooked properly and the flavors melded. But werewolves, it seemed, were more sensitive than humans to such things. "I simply used what was available," she said. "Perhaps your men were hungrier than you realized." Fenris studied her for a long moment, then moved to the window. "My scout reported strange lights in the forest last night, several miles south. Moving lights, like torches, but too organized to be travelers." He turned back to her. "They appeared around the same time you stumbled into our territory." Ice formed in Astrid's stomach. Too soon. She'd hoped for more time before they found her trail. "I wouldn't know anything about that." "Wouldn't you?" His amber eyes seemed to look straight through her. "Because the scent carried on the wind tells me whoever was out there wasn't entirely human. Neither are you." Before she could respond, rapid footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. A younger man burst through the door without ceremony, his face flushed with urgency. Alpha, riders approaching from the south, at least a dozen, moving fast. Fenris's expression hardened. "How long?" 20 minutes, perhaps less." Astrid's blood turned to ice water. The iron shackles suddenly felt like her only protection, weak as it was. She pulled her knees to her chest, trying to make herself smaller. Fenris noticed her reaction immediately. "You know who they are." It wasn't a question. Astrid closed her eyes, feeling the weight of inevitability settling over her like a shroud. She'd known this day would come eventually, but she'd foolishly hoped for more time. Time to grow stronger, to better understand her abilities, to find others who might help her. "They've come for me," she whispered. The young wolf looked between them, confusion clear on his face. "Alpha?" Fenris raised a hand, silencing him, his gaze never leaving Astrid's face. "Then perhaps it's time you told me exactly what you are, little Viking, and why someone would ride so hard to reclaim you." Outside, the sound of approaching hoofbeats grew steadily closer. The kitchen had become Astrid's sanctuary over the past 3 days, though she remained acutely aware it could just as easily become her tomb. Steam rose from the massive iron pot where she stirred a rich stew, the aroma of herbs and tender meat filling the air. Her fingers moved with practiced precision as she seasoned the broth, tasting and adjusting until it sang on her tongue. Fenris appeared in the doorway without warning, his massive frame filling the stone archway. She'd learned to sense his approach, the way the air itself seemed to thicken with his presence, how even the flames in the hearth flickered as if responding to his dominance. He never made sound when he moved, another reminder that beneath his human appearance lurked something far more dangerous. "The pack grows restless," he said, his deep voice carrying an edge she hadn't heard before. "They question why I keep a Viking woman alive when her people burned our sacred grove last winter." Astrid's hand tightened on the wooden spoon, but she continued stirring. "And what do you tell them?" "That you serve a purpose." His eyes, those unsettling amber orbs, studied her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "But purposes can be temporary." She ladled the stew into a bowl and turned to face him, forcing herself to meet his gaze despite every instinct screaming at her to submit. "Then perhaps it's time I served a greater purpose." Something flickered across his features. Surprise, perhaps even intrigue. "Explain." "Your pack is strong, but strength alone doesn't win wars." She moved closer, close enough to see the faint scars that crisscrossed his neck and arms. Battle wounds from challenges to his leadership, no doubt. You need allies, and alliances are built over shared meals, not torn flesh. Fenris's laugh was low and rumbling, more growl than mirth. "You suggest I invite my enemies to dinner?" "I suggest you stop thinking like a beast and start thinking like a king." The words left her lips before she could stop them, and she saw his eyes narrow dangerously. But she pressed on, knowing retreat would only confirm his view of her as prey. "The northern clans respect strength, yes, but they follow those who can provide prosperity. I've seen chieftains swayed by a well-prepared feast when swords could not move them." He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell the wild scent of him, pine and earth, and something fundamentally untamed. "You speak as one who knows of chieftains and kings. Strange for a starving wanderer." Her pulse quickened, but she forced her expression to remain calm. The less he knew of her past, the better. "I listen, I observe, skills that serve me well in staying alive." For a long moment, they stood in silence, the weight of unspoken challenges hanging between them. Then Fenris reached past her, his arm brushing against hers as he dipped a finger into the stew. The brief contact sent an unwelcome jolt through her, a reminder that despite his monstrous nature, he was still very much a man. He tasted the broth, his expression unreadable. "There's something different about this." Astrid's breath caught. Had he detected something? Some trace of the power that coursed through her blood? She'd been so careful, using only traditional herbs and spices, nothing that might betray her true nature. "Different how?" she managed. "It's—" He paused, seeming to search for words. "It tastes of home, of belonging." His amber eyes found hers again, and she saw something vulnerable flicker in their depths before his usual mask of authority slammed back into place. The pack leaders will feast here tomorrow night. You will prepare the meal." It wasn't a request. But for the first time since her capture, Astrid felt a spark of genuine hope. "I'll need supplies. Fresh herbs from the forest, honey, perhaps some wine if you have it. You'll have whatever you require." He turned to leave, then stopped at the threshold. "But know this, Viking. If you fail to impress them, if even one questions your value—" He let the threat hang unfinished. "I won't fail." The conviction in her voice surprised even her. "I've never failed when it comes to a meal." Something almost like approval crossed his features. "We shall see." After he left, Astrid sank against the stone counter, her legs suddenly unsteady. Tomorrow would be her true test, not just of her culinary skills, but of her ability to navigate the deadly politics of pack hierarchy. She'd convinced Fenris to give her this chance, but convincing his lieutenants would be far more dangerous. As she began planning the menu, her fingers unconsciously traced the hidden mark beneath her sleeve, the intricate rune burned into her flesh years ago in another life. She'd buried Astrid the Blessed deep, but tomorrow she might need to draw on that forbidden power once more. The question was whether she could control it, or if it would consume them all. The aroma of herbs and roasted meat drifted through the longhouse as Astrid carefully stirred the bubbling stew. 3 days had passed since her capture, and she'd managed to keep herself alive by proving her worth in the kitchen. The werewolf pack had initially viewed her with suspicion, but their attitudes began shifting after tasting her cooking. She wiped sweat from her brow with the back of her hand, acutely aware of Fenris watching her from across the great hall. The Alpha sat in his carved wooden chair, dark eyes tracking her every movement. His presence made her skin prickle with awareness, though she couldn't tell if it was fear or something else entirely. "The meat needs more time," she murmured to herself, testing the tenderness with a wooden spoon. Behind her, she heard the heavy footsteps she'd come to recognize. "My pack seems pleased with your work," Fenris said, his deep voice rumbling just behind her shoulder. Astrid didn't turn around, focusing instead on adjusting the seasoning. Hungry bellies are easier to fill than angry ones. Wise words. He moved closer, and she caught his scent, pine, leather, and something wild that made her pulse quicken. "But I wonder what drives such skill. Most Viking women know basic cooking, yet you prepare food like you've studied under masters." Her hand stilled on the spoon. She'd been careful to downplay her abilities, but apparently not careful enough. "My grandmother was particular about such things." The sound held skepticism. "And did your grandmother also teach you to identify wolfsbane by smell alone? I noticed you avoided it when gathering herbs yesterday." Ice formed in Astrid's stomach. She'd spotted the deadly plant among the others and instinctively steered clear, but she hadn't realized he'd been watching. Wolfsbane was fatal to werewolves, though harmless to humans. Most people wouldn't know to avoid it unless they had specific knowledge about lycanthropes. "I avoid plants I don't recognize," she said carefully. "Yet you knew exactly what it was. I saw the recognition in your eyes." This time she did turn to face him, lifting her chin defiantly. "Are you accusing me of something?" Fenris studied her with those unsettling amber eyes. In the firelight, his features seemed more lupine, and she remembered how easily he'd shifted between human and wolf form. The reminder of his true nature should have terrified her, but instead she found herself fascinated by the play of shadows across his angular face. "I'm trying to understand you," he said finally. "You appear at our borders, half dead from hunger, yet you possess knowledge that suggests you're far from the simple village woman you claim to be. Perhaps you're seeing mysteries where none exist." She turned back to the stew, hoping to end the conversation, but his hand caught her wrist. The contact sent electricity through her arm. His skin was fever-warm, and she could feel the barely leashed power in his grip. For a moment, neither moved. "Your pulse is racing," he observed softly. "You're standing very close. Does that frighten you?" She should say yes, should play the terrified captive and perhaps earn his sympathy. Instead, she found herself meeting his gaze steadily. I've seen enough of the world to know that fear rarely improves one's situation. Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, perhaps, or approval. Most humans cower in the presence of my kind. Most humans haven't spent days cooking for your pack while you watch their every move. If you meant to harm me, you would have done it by now. A slow smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. You're either very brave or very foolish. The two aren't mutually exclusive. His laugh was rich and unexpected, and she felt an unwelcome flutter of attraction. This was dangerous territory. She couldn't afford to be drawn to him, not when she carried secrets that could destroy them both. Astrid, her name on his lips, sent another shiver through her. Join me for the evening meal. It wasn't really a request, but it wasn't quite a command either. She glanced around the hall, noting the other pack members watching with interest. Dining with the Alpha would mark her as under his protection, but it would also increase scrutiny of her actions. The stew isn't finished. Eric can watch it. He nodded to one of the younger wolves. Join me. She wiped her hands on her apron, buying time to think. Refusing would seem suspicious, but accepting felt like stepping into a snare. Yet what choice did she have? She was his prisoner, regardless of how gently he treated her. Very well. As she followed him to the high table, Astrid couldn't shake the feeling that she was crossing a line from which there would be no return. The careful distance she'd maintained was crumbling, and she wasn't sure she possessed the strength to rebuild it. Not when Fenris looked at her like she was a puzzle he intended to solve. The morning mist clung to the forest floor like ghostly fingers as Astrid made her way to the stream, a wooden bucket in each hand. 3 days had passed since her encounter with Fenris in the kitchen, and she had thrown herself into her work with renewed determination. The pack's meals had grown more elaborate, more flavorful, and she could see the appreciation in their eyes even as they maintained their wary distance. She knelt beside the rushing water, filling the first bucket when a twig snapped behind her, her body tensed, every instinct screaming danger, but she forced herself to continue her task with steady hands. You move like someone who's known death intimately. The voice belonged to Bjorn, Fenris's second in command. She had watched him during meals, noting how his pale eyes never seemed to miss anything, how the other wolves deferred to him with a respect born of both fear and admiration. We all know death in the north, she replied without turning, lifting the heavy bucket and setting it aside before starting on the second. Some know it as prey, others as predator. His footsteps moved closer, deliberate and measured. Which are you, little cook? The question hung in the air between them like a blade. Astrid's fingers tightened on the bucket's rim, and for a moment she felt the familiar stirring in her blood. That terrible hunger that had once defined her existence. She pushed it down deep into the shadows where it belonged. I am what you see, she said finally, standing and facing him. Nothing more. Bjorn studied her with those unsettling pale eyes, and she had the distinct feeling he could see straight through her carefully constructed facade. A scar ran from his left temple to his jaw, and when he smiled it was without warmth. Fenris believes you're hiding something. I think you're hiding everything. He circled her slowly, and she forced herself to remain still. The question is whether that makes you dangerous to us, or useful. I make good food. That's useful enough. Perhaps. He stopped directly in front of her, close enough that she could smell the wild scent of him, all pine and predator musk. But good cooks are common. Women who can face down an alpha without flinching, those are rare indeed. Before she could respond, another voice cut through the morning air. Bjorn. Fenris emerged from the tree line, and Astrid felt that familiar electric tension fill the space between them. He moved with fluid grace, but she could see the controlled aggression in every line of his body. Alpha. Bjorn inclined his head slightly, but his eyes never left Astrid's face. I was just getting acquainted with our guest. I'm sure you were. Fenris's voice carried a warning that made the hair on the back of Astrid's neck stand up. Don't you have patrol duties to attend to? For a moment, the two men stared at each other, some silent communication passing between them. Then Bjorn smiled that cold smile again and stepped back. Of course. But Alpha? He paused, glancing once more at Astrid. Be careful what you invite into your den. Some things bite harder than they appear. With that cryptic warning, he melted back into the forest, leaving Astrid alone with Fenris and the weight of unspoken truths. He doesn't trust me, she observed, bending to retrieve the water buckets. Bjorn doesn't trust anyone. It's what makes him good at his job. Fenris moved to help her, his large hands easily lifting both buckets. It's also what makes him dangerous when he decides someone is a threat. They walked back toward the settlement in silence, but Astrid could feel the questions radiating from him like heat from a forge. The morning sun filtered through the canopy above, casting shifting patterns of light and shadow across the forest floor. You're different since the other night, Fenris said finally. Different how? More guarded. More, he struggled for the word, afraid. The observation hit closer to home than she cared to admit. She had been more careful, more controlled, keeping her true nature locked away so tightly it felt like holding her breath. But living half a life was exhausting, and she could feel cracks forming in her composure. Perhaps your second-in-command isn't the only one who sees too much, she murmured. Fenris stopped walking, setting down the buckets and turning to face her fully. In the dappled sunlight, his eyes seemed to burn with an inner fire, and she found herself caught in their intensity. I see a woman running from something, he said quietly. The question is whether you're running from your past or from yourself. The words hit her like a physical blow, stealing the breath from her lungs. For a heartbeat, she wavered on the edge of confession, the weight of her secrets almost too much to bear alone. Then the moment passed, and she picked up her masks once more. Some things are better left buried, she whispered, reaching for the buckets. His hand caught hers, warm and strong, and surprisingly gentle. Not everything, he said. The morning sun filtered through the thick canopy as Astrid made her way to the kitchens, her bare feet silent against the stone floors. 3 days had passed since her arrival, and she'd fallen into an uneasy rhythm within the pack's stronghold. The werewolves watched her with curious eyes, their nostrils flaring slightly when she passed, but none had challenged her presence since Fenris had claimed her as his cook. She pushed open the heavy wooden door to find the kitchen already alive with activity. Several pack members lounged around the great hearth, their conversation dying as she entered. Among them sat a woman with silver-streaked hair and knowing amber eyes that seemed to pierce straight through her. You must be the Viking who's bewitched our Alpha's stomach, the woman said, her voice carrying the weight of authority. I am Magna, the pack's healer. Astrid inclined her head respectfully. I am called Astrid. I merely cook what the forest provides. Merely? Magna's laugh held no warmth. Child, I've lived through 3 centuries, and I've never seen Fenris so attentive to anyone's presence. He's taken every meal in the great hall since you arrived, when he used to eat in solitude for months at a time. Heat crept up Astrid's neck. She busied herself checking the stores of dried herbs, trying to ignore the meaningful looks exchanged between the pack members. The Alpha honors me by enjoying my cooking. Honors you? A younger male werewolf snorted. He nearly tore Jakob's throat out yesterday for suggesting you might be more useful in other ways. Enough, Torven. Magna's sharp tone silenced him, but her gaze remained fixed on Astrid. Tell me, girl, what exactly are you running from? The question hit like a physical blow. Astrid's hand instinctively moved to the hidden pendant beneath her rough-spun dress, the metal warm against her skin. I don't know what you mean. Your scent, Magna said, rising gracefully from her seat. There's something layered about it, as if you carry more than one nature within you. She stepped closer, nostrils flaring delicately. And there's magic clinging to you. Old magic. Astrid's heart hammered against her ribs. She forced herself to remain still as the healer circled her like a predator. I'm just a cook, a survivor, perhaps. Magna's eyes glittered. But survival often requires us to become more than we were born to be, doesn't it? Before Astrid could respond, heavy footsteps echoed in the corridor. Fenris appeared in the doorway, his massive frame filling the entrance. His dark gaze swept the room, lingering on Magna's proximity to Astrid with unmistakable displeasure. "Magna." His voice carried a warning. "I trust you're not interrogating my cook, merely getting acquainted." The healer stepped back with a knowing smile. "We were discussing the nature of survival." Fenris moved into the kitchen with predatory grace, his presence seeming to charge the very air. The other pack members quickly found reasons to leave, filing past their alpha with respectful nods. Magna lingered, her ancient eyes moving between Astrid and Fenris with calculating interest. "Be careful, old friend," she murmured to Fenris as she passed. "Some secrets have teeth sharper than our own." When they were alone, Fenris turned to Astrid. The intensity of his gaze made her skin prickle with awareness. What did she want? "To know who I am," Astrid answered honestly, beginning to pull ingredients from the stores. "What I am. And what did you tell her? The truth, that I'm a cook." She met his eyes boldly. Nothing more. Something flickered across his features. Disappointment? Relief? "We all have our secrets, Astrid. The question is whether those secrets will bring danger to my pack." Her hands stilled on the herbs she'd been gathering. "Would you cast me out if they did?" He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, could catch his wild masculine scent. "That would depend on the nature of the danger. And if I told you I don't know? That I've been running for so long I'm no longer sure what hunts me?" His hand rose as if he meant to touch her face, then dropped back to his side. "Then I would tell you that running ends here. Whatever comes for you will have to go through me first." The fierce protectiveness in his voice made her chest tight. No one had ever offered to stand between her and the darkness that pursued her. She wanted to lean into his strength, to tell him everything, about the pendant, about what she truly was, about the power that stirred within her whenever he was near. Instead, she turned back to her work. "You barely know me." "I know enough." His voice was rough. "I know you have courage. I know you face hardship without complaint, and I know that whatever drove you into these woods, you didn't deserve it." If only that were true, she thought, touching the hidden pendant once more. The morning sun cast long shadows across the courtyard as Astrid kneaded dough with practiced precision, her fingers working the mixture until it achieved the perfect texture. 3 days had passed since her confrontation with Magnus in the kitchen, and an uneasy truce had settled between them. He watched her cook with an intensity that made her skin prickle, but he no longer questioned her methods or ingredients. She had just begun shaping the bread when a commotion erupted from the main hall. Shouts echoed off the stone walls, followed by the heavy thud of boots. Astrid's hands stilled, flour dusting her palms as she strained to listen. "Alpha?" A gruff voice boomed. "We bring urgent news from the northern border." Magnus's response was too low to hear, but the tension in the air was palpable. Astrid wiped her hands on her apron and crept closer to the doorway, her heart beginning to race. "Raiders," the voice continued, clearer now, but not ordinary ones. "They bear the mark of the Blood Moon clan." The breath left Astrid's lungs in a rush. Her knees nearly buckled as memories crashed over her. Torches in the night, screams echoing across frozen ground, the metallic taste of fear and smoke. The Blood Moon clan. She had hoped never to hear that name again. How many? Magnus's voice carried the edge of his wolf, dangerous and sharp. 24, maybe more. They're moving fast, hitting settlements and asking questions. They're looking for someone. Alpha. A woman. Astrid's hand flew to her throat, where beneath her dress lay the small silver pendant she kept hidden, the only remaining link to who she had been before the fire, before the running, before she had learned to bury her true nature so deep that even she sometimes forgot what lay sleeping in her blood. "What kind of questions?" Magnus demanded. "About a girl who survived the burning of Skjern village. Red hair, green eyes, skilled in the old ways. They say she's worth more to them than gold." The wooden spoon in Astrid's other hand clattered to the floor. She tried to catch it, but her hands were shaking too badly. The sound seemed to echo like thunder in the sudden silence that followed. Heavy footsteps approached the kitchen. Magnus appeared in the doorway, his golden eyes fixed on her face with an expression she couldn't read. Behind him she could see 3 of his warriors, their faces grim beneath travel-stained cloaks. "The old ways," Magnus said quietly, his gaze never leaving hers. "That's an interesting phrase, don't you think, Astrid?" She forced herself to meet his stare, though every instinct screamed at her to run. "I wouldn't know, my lord. I'm just a cook." One of the warriors stepped forward, studying her with predatory interest. "Red hair, green eyes," he said slowly. "Could be a coincidence." "Could be," Magnus agreed, but his tone suggested he thought otherwise. "Tell me about Skjern village, Astrid." Her mouth went dry. "I've never heard of it." "Really? Because my scout here says it burned 5 years ago, completely destroyed in a single night. Only one survivor was ever found, a young woman who disappeared before anyone could question her properly." The walls of the kitchen seemed to be closing in. Astrid's fingers found the edge of the table, gripping it to keep herself upright. "Many villages have burned, my lord. These are dangerous times." "Indeed they are." Magnus took a step closer, and she could feel the heat radiating from his body, could smell the wild scent that marked him as something more than human. Especially dangerous for those who practice the old magic, the kind that was supposedly lost with the destruction of the ancient bloodlines. The pendant at her throat felt like it was burning through her skin. She had been so careful, so cautious in her use of what small gifts remained to her. But Magnus was too observant, too intelligent, and now the Blood Moon clan was close enough to taste. "I should return to my bread," she said, her voice barely steady. "It will overproof if I leave it much longer." "The bread can wait." His hand shot out faster than thought, fingers closing around her wrist with gentle but unmistakable firmness. "We have more pressing matters to discuss." At his touch, something electric passed between them. Magnus's eyes widened slightly, and she knew he had felt it too, the spark of recognition between 2 creatures of power. Her carefully constructed walls began to crumble. "Please," she whispered, hating the desperation in her voice. "You don't understand what you're risking by keeping me here." "Then explain it to me." Before she could answer, a horn sounded from the watchtower, long, mournful notes that spoke of approaching danger. The warriors tensed, hands moving instinctively to their weapons. Riders approaching from the north, one of them reported after listening to the signal. "Flying Blood Moon banners." Magnus's grip on her wrist tightened. "It seems explanations will have to wait. They've found you." The morning mist clung to the forest floor like ghostly fingers as Astrid made her way to the herb garden behind the great hall. 3 days had passed since the incident with Magnus, and she'd thrown herself into her cooking with renewed vigor, as if the familiar rhythms of chopping and seasoning could somehow anchor her to this new life she was building. She knelt beside a patch of wild rosemary, breathing in its sharp, piney scent. The herbs here grew differently than they had in her homeland, wilder, more potent. Everything in Bjorn's territory seemed touched by the same primal energy that radiated from the Alpha himself. "You're up early." His voice rumbled behind her, and she didn't startle this time. She'd grown accustomed to his silent approaches, the way he could move through the forest without disturbing so much as a fallen leaf. "The herbs are strongest just after dawn," she replied, not turning around. Her fingers worked carefully around the delicate stems, gathering only what she needed, before the sun burns away the morning dew. Bjorn settled beside her with surprising grace for such a large man. In the pale morning light, she could see the exhaustion etched into his features. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and tension pulled at the corners of his mouth. "You haven't been sleeping," she observed, finally meeting his gaze. He huffed a laugh that held no humor. Perceptive as always, he was quiet for a moment, watching her nimble fingers work. "The pack is restless. Magnus's challenge has them questioning my authority, even though he failed." Astrid's hands stilled. "Because of me. Because change is difficult for them to accept." His tone was careful, diplomatic. "They've lived a certain way for generations, a human in their midst." He trailed off. She understood. She was an outsider, a disruption to their ancient order. No matter how well she cooked or how useful she made herself, she would always be other. "Perhaps it would be better if I left," she said quietly, though the words felt like swallowing glass. The thought of leaving this place, leaving him, sent an unexpected pang through her chest. Bjorn's hand shot out, covering hers before she could reach for another sprig of rosemary. His touch was warm, calloused, infinitely gentle. No. The single word held such fierce conviction that she looked up in surprise. His amber eyes burned with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You belong here, Astrid, more than Magnus ever did." His thumb traced across her knuckles, and she felt that familiar flutter in her stomach. The pack will adapt. They have to. Before she could respond, a howl echoed across the valley, long, mournful, and distinctly alien. Not one of Bjorn's wolves. Both of them tensed, Bjorn's head snapping toward the sound with predatory alertness. "Stay close to the hall today," he commanded, already rising to his feet. The transformation in him was instant and complete, from the gentle man who'd been touching her hand to the alpha preparing for potential threat. But Astrid had frozen for an entirely different reason. She knew that howl, the pitch, the cadence, the way it seemed to carry an ancient sadness on the wind. Her blood turned to ice water in her veins. They'd found her. "Astrid?" Bjorn's voice seemed to come from very far away. "What is it?" She forced herself to breathe, to school her features into something resembling calm, but her hands shook as she gathered the scattered herbs. And she knew he noticed everything. "Nothing," she lied, hating the way the word tasted bitter on her tongue, just startled by the sound. His eyes narrowed, studying her with uncomfortable intensity. She could practically see him cataloguing her tells, the way her shoulders had drawn up toward her ears, how her breathing had quickened, the tremor in her voice. "That wasn't one of my wolves," he said slowly. "No," she agreed, because denying it would be pointless. It wasn't. Another howl answered the first, this one from the opposite direction. Then another. They were being surrounded, methodically and precisely. Astrid's heart hammered against her ribs as the net drew tighter around them. Bjorn was on his feet now, his body coiled with tension. "Get inside. Now." She wanted to obey, to run to the safety of the great hall and hide behind its thick walls, but she knew it wouldn't matter. They hadn't come this far to be deterred by wood and stone. "Bjorn," she started, then stopped. How could she explain? How could she tell him that everything he thought he knew about her was a lie, that the woman who'd been cooking his meals and sharing his table carried a darkness that could destroy everything he'd built? The herbs scattered from her nerveless fingers as she stood. In the distance, she could see shapes moving through the trees. Too large to be natural wolves, too coordinated to be anything but hunters. Her past had finally caught up with her, and this time there would be nowhere left to run. The morning mist clung to the forest floor like ghostly fingers as Astrid made her way to the stream, a wooden bucket swinging gently at her side. 3 weeks had passed since her arrival at Fenris's stronghold, and she had settled into a rhythm that felt dangerously close to contentment. The werewolf pack had accepted her presence, drawn by the intoxicating aromas that wafted from her kitchen and the way their alpha's perpetual scowl had softened around the edges. She knelt beside the rushing water, letting the cold liquid fill her bucket while her mind wandered to the previous evening. Fenris had lingered after the meal again, his massive frame dwarfing the wooden chair as he watched her clean the cooking vessels. Their conversations had grown less guarded, peppered with shared laughter and meaningful glances that made her pulse quicken. A twig snapped behind her. Astrid's blood turned to ice. That hadn't been the careless footfall of a pack member or the deliberate approach of Fenris. This was the sound of someone trying to move silently and failing, someone who didn't belong. She forced herself to continue filling the bucket, every muscle coiled tight. The familiar weight of the small knife at her belt offered little comfort against what she feared was coming. Astrid Bloodweaver. The voice froze the marrow in her bones. She knew that cultured tone, that slight accent that spoke of southern courts and political machinations. Slowly she turned. Lord Valdris stood 20 paces away, his pale eyes gleaming with satisfaction. The vampire lord looked exactly as she remembered, tall, elegant, and utterly without mercy. His dark hair was pulled back in an intricate knot, and his travelling clothes bore no trace of the journey that must have brought him this far north. "Did you truly think you could hide from me forever?" he asked, taking a measured step forward. "Your talents are far too valuable to simply disappear into the wilderness." Astrid's hand moved instinctively toward her knife, but Valdris raised one pale finger in warning. "I wouldn't recommend that. My companions have already surrounded this charming little settlement. One wrong move from you, and every werewolf in that stronghold dies." His smile revealed the barest hint of fang. "Including your handsome alpha." The bucket slipped from her nerveless fingers, water cascading over the rocky streambed. "How did you find me?" "Blood calls to blood, my dear, and yours has such a distinctive signature." He inhaled deeply, as if savoring a fine wine. "The power that flows through your veins is intoxicating. Did you really think a few burned buildings and a convenient fire would erase what you are?" Memories crashed over her. The screaming, the crimson mist rising from her hands, the way Lord Valdris had smiled as she killed his enemies with nothing but her will and their own life force. She had been his weapon, his prized possession, until the night she had finally found the strength to turn that terrible gift against his own servants and flee. "I'm not that person anymore," she whispered. "Oh, but you are." His voice carried the hypnotic cadence she remembered, the one that had once wrapped around her mind like chains. "You are Astrid, Bloodweaver, blood mage without equal. These little domestic games you've been playing are amusing, but it's time to come home." A howl echoed from the direction of the stronghold, not one of alarm, but of greeting. Fenris was returning from his morning patrol. Astrid's heart hammered against her ribs as she imagined him walking unsuspecting into whatever trap Valdris had prepared. "Leave them alone," she said, straightening to her full height. "Your quarrel is with me." "Indeed it is, but they make such excellent leverage." Valdris tilted his head, studying her with the clinical interest of a scholar examining an interesting specimen. "You've grown fond of them. How delightfully unexpected. I thought I had trained that weakness out of you." Another howl, closer now. Soon Fenris would crest the ridge and see them. Astrid could picture his reaction. The protective fury that would blaze in his golden eyes, the way he would charge forward without considering the consequences. He would die trying to save her, and she couldn't bear that weight on her soul. "What do you want?" she asked. "The same thing I've always wanted, your service, your power." His pale eyes glittered with ancient hunger. "There's a war coming, Astrid. The old treaties are crumbling, and I intend to emerge victorious. With you at my side, we'll reshape this world." The sound of approaching footsteps made her decision for her. She stepped forward, chin raised in surrender. "If I come willingly, you'll leave them unharmed? You have my word." Astrid almost laughed at that. A vampire's word was worth less than smoke, but she had no other choice. At least this way Fenris and his pack would have a chance to survive what was coming. "Then I accept," she said, her voice steady despite the terror clawing at her chest. Valdris smiled, and darkness began to gather around them like hungry wings. The morning mist clung to the forest floor like ghostly fingers as Astrid made her way to the stream, wooden buckets balanced carefully in each hand. 3 weeks had passed since the shadow creature's attack, and though the pack had returned to their routines, an undercurrent of tension remained. Wolves patrolled in larger groups now, and she'd noticed how their eyes swept the tree line with newfound wariness. She knelt beside the rushing water, filling the first bucket, when a familiar scent caught her attention. Not the earthy musk of the pack, but something sharper, more dangerous. Her blood turned to ice as a figure emerged from behind the massive oak tree across the stream. "Hello, sister." Astrid's hands trembled as she recognized the pale hair and cruel smile of Ingvar, her brother. He looked exactly as she remembered, tall and lean, with the predatory grace that had made him father's favorite. The silver amulet at his throat caught the morning light, and she knew without looking that it bore the mark of the blood moon coven. "You've led us quite a chase," he continued, stepping closer to the water's edge. "2 years of searching and we find you playing house with a pack of mutts." "I don't know what you're talking about." The lie tasted bitter on her tongue, but she forced her voice to remain steady. "You must have me confused with someone else." Ingvar's laughter was like breaking glass. "Oh, Astrid, still pretending to be something you're not? Tell me, does your wolf know what you really are? Does he know about the gift that flows through your veins?" Her heart hammered against her ribs. She glanced toward the settlement, calculating the distance. If she could just reach the boundary markers, call out for help. "I wouldn't," Ingvar said, following her gaze. "Not unless you want to see this place burned to ash with everyone inside it. The High Seer has been most generous with her resources. A dozen of our best circle this territory as we speak." The bucket slipped from Astrid's numb fingers, water splashing across her boots. "What do you want?" "What we've always wanted, for you to fulfill your destiny." He produced a familiar crystal pendant from his cloak, its surface swirling with dark energy. "The ritual of binding approaches. The stars align in just 3 days, and the High Seer requires your power to complete the summoning." "I won't do it." The words came out stronger than she felt. "I'd rather die first." "Death?" Ingvar tilted his head thoughtfully. "That can certainly be arranged, but not for you, dear sister. For them." He gestured toward the settlement where smoke was beginning to rise from morning cooking fires. "Every last wolf in this pack, starting with your precious Alpha. I imagine he'd make quite the spectacle. We've developed new techniques for prolonging the process." Astrid's knees nearly buckled. She thought of Magnus teaching the young ones to hunt, of Brenna laughing over breakfast, of all the small kindnesses this pack had shown her when she'd arrived half dead from hunger and cold. They didn't deserve to suffer for her sins. "You have until sunset," Ingvar continued. "Meet us at the old stone circle, 5 leagues north of here. Come alone and submit willingly to the ritual, and we'll leave your wolves unharmed. Refuse or bring help." He smiled, showing teeth that seemed too sharp. "Well, I think you understand the consequences." A wolf's howl echoed through the forest. The patrols signaled that they were returning to the settlement. Ingvar's eyes flicked toward the sound, his expression shifting to one of mild annoyance. "Time to go, it seems, but before I leave, a small demonstration of our reach." He raised his hand, fingers dancing in an intricate pattern. The water between them began to bubble and hiss, taking on an oily black sheen. A single drop of this in their well, and the entire pack dies in agony within hours. Remember that when you're tempted to confess everything to your Alpha. The corrupted water spread outward in dark tendrils before dissipating into harmless stream flow once more. When Astrid looked up, her brother had vanished as silently as he'd appeared. She stood frozen for long moments, staring at the spot where he'd been. The familiar sounds of the awakening settlement drifted through the trees, children's laughter, the clang of metal on metal from the forge, Magnus's deep voice calling instructions to the morning hunters. Normal sounds, safe sounds, all of it built on a foundation of lies she'd constructed so carefully over the past months. Her legs finally remembered how to move, carrying her mechanically back toward the settlement with her half-filled buckets. Each step felt like a betrayal, each breath a stolen moment of peace that belonged to someone else, someone who deserved the life she'd tried so desperately to build here. By sunset, it would all be over, one way or another. The only question now was whether she'd have the courage to tell Magnus the truth before she left to face her fate alone. The morning air bit through Astrid's cloak as she followed Bjorn deeper into the ancient grove. Towering oaks twisted skyward like gnarled fingers, their branches heavy with silver moss that seemed to shimmer with its own inner light. The very ground beneath her feet hummed with power, making her teeth ache and her hidden mark burn against her ribs. "Are you certain about this?" Bjorn's voice carried a tension she'd rarely heard from him. His massive frame moved with uncharacteristic wariness through the sacred space. Astrid pulled her cloak tighter, though the cold wasn't what made her shiver. The dreams are getting stronger. Every night I see her, my grandmother's sister, the one who taught me the old ways before. She swallowed hard, before she vanished. They emerged into a circular clearing where standing stones jutted from the earth like broken teeth. Ancient runes carved deep into their surfaces seemed to pulse with the same ethereal glow as the moss. At the center sat a stone altar, its surface stained dark with centuries of offerings. Bjorn's nostrils flared as his enhanced senses swept the area. "We're not alone." From behind the largest stone stepped a figure that made Astrid's breath catch. The woman was ageless in the way of the old blood. Her face could have belonged to someone 20 summers or 200. Silver hair cascaded down her back like moonlight, and her eyes held depths that spoke of knowledge better left buried. "Astrid Eriksdottir." The woman's voice carried the whisper of wind through winter pines. "I wondered when you would finally come seeking answers, Aunt Sigrid." The name fell from Astrid's lips like a prayer. "They said you were dead." A smile played at the corners of Sigrid's mouth, neither warm nor cold. Death is a flexible concept for those who walk between worlds. Her gaze shifted to Bjorn, and something dangerous flickered in her expression. "You brought your wolf." Bjorn stepped closer to Astrid, a low growl building in his chest. "I go where she goes." "How protective." Sigrid circled them slowly, her bare feet silent on the frost-covered ground. "Tell me, niece, does he know what you truly are? What we both are?" Astrid's hand moved instinctively to her ribs, where the mark lay hidden. "I know I'm cursed. I know that's why my cooking can heal or harm, why I can sense things others cannot. But the rest—" She lifted her chin, meeting her aunt's otherworldly gaze. "The rest you never taught me before you disappeared." "I didn't disappear, child. I was banished." Sigrid's expression hardened. "Banished by our own kin for refusing to use our gifts as weapons in their endless wars." She gestured to the standing stones. "So I came here, to the old places where the veil is thin and truth cannot hide." Bjorn's hand found Astrid's, his warmth anchoring her as Sigrid's words sent ice through her veins. "What gifts?" Sigrid laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Show him, Astrid. Show your wolf what runs in our bloodline. I don't know how—" "You do." Sigrid's voice took on a commanding tone that seemed to resonate in Astrid's bones. "You've always known. The mark on your ribs isn't a curse, foolish girl. It's a seal, a prison we place on ourselves to contain what we truly are." The burning sensation in Astrid's ribs intensified, spreading outward like fire through her veins. She gasped, doubling over as power she'd never fully understood began to wake within her. Around them, the standing stones pulsed brighter, responding to the energy building in her blood. "Astrid!" Bjorn caught her as she stumbled, his own eyes flashing golden with the instinct to protect. "What are you doing to her?" "None she hasn't done to herself for years." Sigrid watched with clinical interest as Astrid fought against the rising tide of power. "We are the Volva Wolf, the seeresses, the shapers of fate itself, but such power comes with a price, and enemies who would see us destroyed." Through the haze of pain, Astrid felt something snap inside her chest. The burning mark on her ribs flared once, then suddenly cooled, leaving behind a sensation of vast, untapped potential. When she straightened, the world looked different, colors more vivid, the threads of fate visible like silver lines connecting all living things. "The seal is weakening," she whispered, understanding flooding through her. "That's why the dreams have been getting stronger, why I can do things I shouldn't be able to do." Sigrid nodded approvingly. "And why they've found you again, the old enemies, the ones who hunted our kind to near extinction." Her expression grew grim. "They're coming, child. Even now they gather their forces. Your little wolf pack won't be enough to protect you when they arrive." Bjorn's grip on Astrid tightened. "Then we'll find a way to make it enough." "Will you?" Sigrid's gaze moved between them, calculating. even when you learn the full truth of what she is, what she's capable of." Her smile turned predatory. "Very well. Let us see how deep your devotion truly runs." The standing stones flared with brilliant light, and Astrid's world dissolved into visions of blood and fire. The morning mist clung to the forest floor like ghostly fingers as Astrid knelt beside the herb garden she had cultivated behind the pack's longhouse. Her hands moved with practiced precision, selecting the youngest nettle leaves and the most potent wolfsbane blooms. Each plant held its own secret, its own power, much like herself. She had been living among Fenris's pack for 3 moons now, and the routine had become as natural as breathing. Cook for the pack, tend her garden, share Fenris's bed, and carefully guard the truth that burned like molten silver in her veins. But yesterday's hunting party had returned with disturbing news. Strange tracks in the Eastern Territory, the scent of old magic, and whispers of riders bearing the raven banner. Her father had found her trail. "You're up early, little wolf." Fenris's voice rumbled behind her, warm with affection despite the tension that had gripped the pack since the previous evening. His massive frame cast a shadow over her as he approached, still shirtless from his dawn patrol. Astrid's fingers tightened around the wolfsbane stems. "The morning herbs are always more potent. Besides, I wanted to prepare something special for tonight's feast." She forced lightness into her voice, though her heart hammered against her ribs. Fenris crouched beside her, his keen amber eyes studying her face. "You've been distant since yesterday. Talk to me." She met his gaze, drowning momentarily in the golden depths that had become her anchor, her home. How could she tell him that everything they had built together balanced on the edge of a blade, that her very presence endangered every soul in his pack? "The eastern borders," she said carefully. "Your scout seemed troubled." A growl rumbled low in Fenris's chest. "Aye, human riders, heavily armed. They bear no banner we recognize, but their scent carries something unnatural, magic, but not the clean kind." His hand found hers, fingers intertwining. "Whatever they seek, they won't find it here. I won't let anything harm what's mine." The fierce protectiveness in his voice made her throat tighten. If only he knew what truly hunted through these woods, not just any raiders, but Jarl Magnus the Bloodied, her own father, whose thirst for power had driven her to flee in the first place, the same man who had discovered her gift for battle magic and sought to weaponize it, to forge her into an instrument of conquest that could bring entire kingdoms to their knees. "Fenris," she whispered, then stopped. The words lodged in her throat like thorns. He studied her with increasing intensity. "There's something you're not telling me. I can smell the fear on you, Astrid. Not fear of those riders, fear of something else entirely." Before she could respond, a howl echoed from the forest's edge, Ragnar's voice, sharp with alarm. Fenris was on his feet instantly, his body already beginning the shift that would transform him into his wolf form. But Astrid caught his wrist. "Wait." Her voice carried a strange resonance that made him freeze. "Let me come with you." "Absolutely not. If there's danger, then you'll need every advantage." She rose, still gripping his arm, and for a moment something flickered behind her green eyes, a silver light that seemed to pulse with otherworldly power. "Trust me." Fenris stared at her, and she could see the questions building behind his gaze. But another howl split the morning air, closer this time, and he nodded curtly. "Stay behind me. Don't engage unless I give the word." They moved through the forest with predatory grace, Fenris's enhanced senses guiding them toward the disturbance. Astrid followed, her hand never straying far from the small bone-handled knife at her belt. Not the cooking blade Fenris knew about, but the ritual dagger her grandmother had pressed into her hands the night she fled her father's hall. They reached a ridge overlooking the pack's territory just as a line of horsemen emerged from the tree line below. 20 warriors in dark mail, their shields painted with the distinctive blood-red raven of Magnus's house. At their head rode a figure Astrid recognized with a chill that cut straight to her bones. Jarl Magnus himself, his grey-streaked beard bound with silver rings, his pale eyes scanning the forest with predatory intensity. He had aged in the months since she'd seen him, but the aura of barely contained violence remained unchanged. "Do you know them?" Fenris's voice was barely a whisper, but she caught the edge in it, the suspicion that had been building for days. Astrid watched her father raise his hand, signaling his men to halt. Even at this distance, she could see him testing the air, seeking the scent of magic that would lead him to his runaway daughter. The daughter whose power he intended to claim one way or another. "Yes," she said quietly, her hand moving to rest against Fenris's back. "They're here for me." The admission hung between them like a blade, sharp and unforgiving. Below, Magnus called out in the old tongue, his words carrying clearly through the morning air. "Astrid, Magnus' daughter, I know you shelter here. Come home, daughter. Your pack need not suffer for your foolishness." The ancient stones hummed with malevolent energy as Astrid pressed her palms against the crumbling altar. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory, warning her about places like this, forgotten temples where old magic still pulsed like a diseased heart. But desperation made fools of even the wisest, and she had run out of options. "Show me," she whispered to the darkness. "Show me how to break the blood curse." The air grew thick as honey, and shadows began to writhe across the moss-covered walls. Images flickered before her eyes, her ancestors wielding forbidden magic, the price they paid, and the terrible hunger that would eventually consume her just as it had consumed them all. Unless she found another way. A low growl echoed through the temple ruins, and Astrid spun around to find Eric stalking toward her, his amber eyes blazing with fury. Even in human form, he radiated the barely contained violence of his wolf, and she could see the struggle for control written across his features. "Did you think I wouldn't follow your scent?" His voice was rough with emotion. "Did you think I would let you face this alone? You shouldn't have come here." Astrid backed away from the altar, but there was nowhere to run in the circular chamber. "This place is poisonous to your kind. The magic here, I don't care about the magic." Eric closed the distance between them in 3 powerful strides, grasping her shoulders. "I care about you running away in the middle of the night without a word. I care about you trying to shoulder this burden alone when you promised we would face it together." The intensity of his touch sent warmth flooding through her, but beneath it she could feel something else, a wrongness that made her stomach clench with fear. The curse was spreading faster now, awakening in response to her proximity to the ancient power that saturated these stones. "You don't understand," she said, pulling away from him. "The hunger is getting stronger. Last night, when you cut yourself preparing the venison, I could barely stop myself from—" She couldn't finish the sentence. The memory of how desperately she had wanted to taste his blood made her sick with shame. Eric's expression softened, and he reached for her again. "Astrid." She stumbled backward, her heel catching on a loose stone. "Don't you see? This is why my grandmother made me swear to stay away from others. This is why our bloodline dies out, one by one, alone and hungry in the wilderness. Because we become monsters." The shadows on the walls seemed to dance with greater intensity at her words, as if feeding on her despair. Eric's nostrils flared, and she saw his hackles rise in response to whatever dark presence lurked in this place. "You're not a monster," he said firmly, "and I won't let you become one." Before she could protest, he was moving with inhuman speed, positioning himself between her and the altar. The stones there had begun to glow with a sickly green light, and something was taking shape in the shadows, tall, gaunt, with eyes like burning coals. "So," the apparition spoke with a voice like grinding bones, "another daughter of the blood-sworn line comes seeking answers. And she brings a wolf to my sacred place." Dark laughter filled the chamber, how deliciously ironic. Astrid felt the curse respond to the presence, her canines lengthening as the hunger roared to life inside her. But Eric was there, his own transformation rippling just beneath his skin, ready to defend her even against forces he couldn't possibly understand. "What do you want?" Eric demanded, his voice carrying the authority of an alpha. "What I have always wanted," the shadow replied. "What was promised to me long ago when the first of her kind made their bargain. blood freely given, magic freely shared, and a soul to feed my eternal hunger. The pieces clicked into place in Astrid's mind with horrible clarity. "You're the source," she breathed, "the one my ancestor made the pact with. Clever girl. Yes, I granted your foremother the power to survive when she and her children faced starvation. The ability to draw sustenance from blood, to heal quickly, to live longer than ordinary mortals. But power always has a price." Eric's growl deepened, and that price was the souls of her descendants. One soul from each generation, when the magic fully awakens. Your dear Astrid is nearly ripe for the harvest, the entity's burning gaze fixed on her. Though I might be persuaded to make a new arrangement, after all, the blood of an alpha wolf would be far more nourishing than that of a simple mortal. "Never," Astrid snarled, the curse fully awakened now, transforming her into something caught between human and predator. "I won't let you touch him." The ancient being laughed again. "Oh, child, you misunderstand. The choice isn't yours to make. The magic is already claiming you. Soon you'll be so consumed by hunger that you'll drain him dry yourself." The ancient stone altar hummed with dark energy as Astrid pressed her palms against its weathered surface. The symbols carved into the rock pulsed with an otherworldly light, responding to her touch like old friends welcoming her home. She tried to pull away, but her hands remained fixed in place, as if the stone itself had claimed her. "The binding cannot be broken so easily," Bjorn's voice echoed from the shadows behind her. "You were always meant to return here, daughter of shadows." Eric's growl reverberated through the sacred grove, his massive wolf form circling the clearing's perimeter. His golden eyes never left Bjorn, who stood with casual confidence despite the predator stalking mere feet away. The other pack members had formed a protective barrier around the altar, but Astrid could sense their uncertainty. They had never faced magic like this. "Tell me how to break it," Astrid demanded, fighting against the altar's pull. The mark on her shoulder burned like molten iron, and she could feel her human facade beginning to crack. Wisps of shadow leaked from her skin, curling around her fingers like living smoke. Bjorn laughed, the sound sharp as breaking glass. "Break it? Child, you misunderstand. The binding was never meant to be broken, it was meant to be completed." He stepped closer, and Astrid noticed how the very air seemed to bend around him. "Your mother tried to run from her destiny, tried to hide you among mortals. But blood calls to blood, and power demands its due." The shadows around Astrid's hands grew thicker, climbing up her arms like hungry serpents. She watched in horror as her skin began to pale, taking on the translucent quality she remembered from her nightmares. "No, I won't become what you want me to be." "What I want?" Bjorn's eyes flashed with dark amusement. "This has nothing to do with what I want. This is about what you are, what you've always been. The Shadow Walker bloodline ends with you, Astrid. Unless you embrace your inheritance." Eric shifted back to human form, his naked body gleaming with sweat and barely contained rage. "She's not alone in this," he snarled, moving to stand beside the altar. "Whatever claim you think you have on her, it ends now." "Ah, the loyal wolf," Bjorn mused, studying Eric with predatory interest. "Tell me, Alpha, what do you truly know about your precious cook? Have you seen what she becomes when the moon is dark? Have you witnessed the hunger that drives her kind?" Astrid felt Eric's questioning gaze on her, and shame burned in her chest. There were still secrets between them, dark truths she had never found the courage to share. The shadow magic pulsing through her veins whispered seductively, offering power beyond imagination, if only she would surrender to it. "I know enough," Eric said firmly, reaching for her shadow-wreathed hand. The moment his skin touched hers, the darkness recoiled as if burned. "I know she's fought against this curse her entire life. I know she chose love over power, chose to build rather than destroy." The contact with Eric's warm flesh gave Astrid the anchor she needed. She focused on the calluses on his palms, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, the unwavering strength in his grip. These human details became her lifeline as the altar's magic tried to drag her into the void. "You think your bond can save her?" Bjorn's voice carried genuine curiosity now. "Interesting. Your mother tried something similar, Astrid. She bound herself to a mortal man, thinking love could overcome her nature. Do you know how that story ended?" "I don't care," Astrid gasped, finally managing to lift one hand from the altar's surface. The stone shrieked in protest, cracks spiderwebbing across its ancient face. "I'm not my mother." "No," Bjorn agreed, his expression shifting to something almost resembling pride. "You're much stronger than she ever was. Strong enough to survive what comes next." Before Astrid could ask what he meant, the clearing exploded into chaos. Warriors emerged from the tree line, not pack members, but humans in strange armor that seemed to absorb light itself. They moved with inhuman speed and precision, weapons gleaming with the same otherworldly energy that pulsed through the altar. "Shadow hunters," Bjorn announced, with theatrical flair. "I'm afraid they've finally tracked you down, my dear. They've been searching for the last Shadow Walker for quite some time." Eric roared his fury, shifting back to wolf form in a blur of motion. The pack responded instantly, meeting the attackers with fang and claw. But Astrid could see they were outnumbered and outmatched. These weren't ordinary soldiers. They moved like dancers, their weapons leaving trails of silver fire that burned even the air itself. The altar's magic surged one final time, and Astrid felt the last of her restraint shatter. Power flooded through her like a dam breaking, and for the first time in her life, she stopped fighting against her nature. The shadows rose around her like a living storm, and when she opened her eyes, they burned with starlight. The real battle was about to begin. The forest erupted into chaos as the rival pack burst through the tree line, their howls piercing the dawn air like war cries. Astrid's heart hammered against her ribs as she pressed herself against the ancient oak, watching silver-furred wolves circle the clearing where Fenris stood with his warriors. "Bjorn sends his regards," snarled the lead wolf, his massive frame shifting and bones cracking as he took human form. Scarred and battle-worn, he bore the mark of countless fights etched across his chest. "The cook belongs to us now." Fenris's answering growl rumbled deep enough to shake the ground beneath Astrid's feet. "Magnus, still skulking in shadows like the coward you've always been." The accusation struck home. Magnus's lips curled back, revealing teeth still sharp from his transformation. "Coward? I'm not the one hiding behind a mortal woman's skirts." His pale eyes found Astrid through the trees, and she fought the urge to run. "Come out, little witch. Your blood debt calls." Astrid's throat constricted. They knew. Somehow they knew what she truly was. "She owes you nothing," Fenris said, but uncertainty flickered across his features as he glanced toward her hiding place. The doubt in his gaze cut deeper than any blade. "Doesn't she?" Magnus laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Tell me, Alpha, what do you really know about your precious cook? Did she mention the village of Ravenshollow?" The name hit Astrid like a physical blow. Memories flooded back, flames consuming wooden houses, screams echoing through smoke-filled streets, and her own hands glowing with destructive power she couldn't control. "That was an accident," she whispered, but her voice carried on the wind. Magnus heard her. They all did. An accident that killed 30 innocents, including Bjorn's younger brother. He took a step forward, his pack flanking him. The boy was only 12 summers old. Astrid stumbled from behind the tree, her legs trembling. The weight of 37 lives. She'd counted them all, memorized every name, pressed down on her shoulders like stones. "I never meant for anyone to die. The magic, it just..." "Magic?" Fenris's voice was barely a whisper, but it silenced the entire clearing. He turned to face her fully, and she saw her worst fears reflected in his golden eyes. Betrayal, disgust, fear. "You're a sorceress," he breathed. The word hung between them like a chasm. In the old ways, magic wielders were to be respected, even revered. But the new world had made them pariahs, blamed for plagues and failed harvests, hunted by those who feared what they couldn't understand. "I tried to tell you," Astrid said, tears burning her eyes. "So many times I almost—" "Almost what?" "Almost mentioned you could kill us all with a gesture." His transformation was beginning, muscles rippling beneath his skin, eyes blazing. "My pack trusted you. I trusted you." "She cooked for your enemies too, didn't she?" Magnus pressed his advantage, sensing weakness. "Before the village burned, she served the rival clan. Probably poisoned our warriors' minds along with their food." "That's not true!" Astrid's emotions surged, and the ancient power stirred within her like a sleeping dragon awakening. The air around her began to shimmer with heat, and several wolves whimpered, backing away. "Prove it then," Magnus challenged. "Show us this magic that slaughtered children. Let your true nature free." "No." Astrid clenched her fists, forcing the power down. She'd spent 3 years learning control, 3 years cooking simple meals instead of weaving spells, 3 years trying to atone. "I won't hurt anyone else. Then you'll come with us willingly," Magnus said. "Face Bjorn's justice for your crimes." "She goes nowhere." Fenris stepped between them, but his posture remained rigid, conflicted. "Whatever she's done, she's under my protection." The statement should have filled Astrid with relief, but she heard the duty in his voice rather than affection. He was protecting her because honor demanded it, not because he still cared. Magnus smiled coldly. "Even now, knowing what she is, your grandfather would roll in his grave seeing you defend a magic wielder." "My grandfather was a fool who let fear guide his choices," Fenris replied, but doubt continued to flicker across his features. Astrid couldn't bear to watch him struggle between duty and disgust any longer. The man who had held her so tenderly just hours before now looked at her like she might spontaneously combust, which, given her abilities, wasn't entirely unreasonable. "I'll go," she said quietly. "Astrid, no. It's better this way." She met his eyes one last time, memorizing the gold flecks that reminded her of honey and hearthfire. "You can't protect someone you don't trust, and I can't live with more blood on my hands." She stepped toward Magnus, her decision made. If dying could bring peace to the ghosts that haunted her dreams, perhaps it would be worth it. The crimson moon hung like a wound in the sky, its light casting everything in shades of blood and shadow. Astrid's hands trembled as she ground the last of the moonsbane root into powder, the acrid scent burning her nostrils. Around her, the pack's fortress buzzed with preparation. Warriors sharpening claws, mothers herding children to safety, elders chanting protective wards that would mean nothing against what was coming. Fenrir stood at the great hall's entrance, his massive frame silhouetted against the firelight. Even in human form, power radiated from him like heat from a forge. His amber eyes found hers across the chaos, and for a heartbeat, the world narrowed to just the two of them. In his gaze, she saw everything they'd shared, the tentative trust, the passionate nights, the impossible love that had bloomed despite every reason it shouldn't exist. "They're here," he said, voice carrying despite the din. "I can smell their magic on the wind." Astrid's blood sang in response, recognizing the approach of her own kind. The Covenant had finally found her, just as she'd always known they would. 3 years of hiding, 3 years of pretending to be nothing more than a starving Viking woman with a talent for herbs and cooking, and now it was ending. The moonsbane powder slipped through her fingers like silver sand. "How many?" She forced her voice to remain steady, though her heart hammered against her ribs. 20, maybe more. Fenrir's jaw clenched, powerful ones, old magic. 20 sorcerers against 1 pack. The numbers were impossible, even with Fenrir's strength. The Covenant hadn't come to negotiate or reclaim her. They'd come to eliminate every witness to her betrayal, everyone who might have learned what she truly was. A howl split the night, low and mournful. Then another. The perimeter guards had made contact. Astrid moved to Fenrir's side, her hand finding his. His fingers closed around hers, warm and solid and alive. "There's something you need to know," she whispered, "about what I really am, why they want me so badly." Tell me later. His thumb traced across her knuckles. When we've survived this, there might not be a later. The words tasted like ash. Fenrir, I'm not just a runaway sorcerer. Light exploded across the courtyard, brilliant and searing. The great wooden gates groaned and splintered as arcane force slammed into them. Shouts erupted from the ramparts as defending wolves transformed, their human shapes flowing into creatures of fang and fury. But the light didn't fade. It spread like spilled quicksilver, and where it touched the wolves, they screamed. Iron chains materialized from nothing, wrapping around throats and limbs, burning flesh with cold fire. The Covenant's binding magic, designed specifically to neutralize shapeshifters. The children, Fenrir snarled, already moving. Get them to the tunnels. Astrid caught his arm. No, this is my fight. Power unfurled within her chest, wild and dangerous after so long suppressed. The air around her began to shimmer. I won't let them hurt your pack for my sins. She stepped into the courtyard before he could stop her. The battle sounds faded as every eye turned toward her, wolf and sorcerer alike. At the broken gates stood a figure she'd hoped never to see again, Thane Mordric, her former master, his pale hair gleaming like spun moonlight beneath his hood. The other Covenant members flanked him, their faces hidden but their power radiating like heat from a pyre. Astrid Moonwhisper, Mordric called, his voice carrying easily across the space. At last, did you truly think you could hide from us forever, playing house with these beasts? The pack bristled at the insult, but Astrid raised her hand. Immediately, the wolves stilled. Even Fenrir, who'd followed her into the courtyard, held his position. They trusted her. Even now, when her past had brought death to their doorstep, they trusted her. It broke her heart. I had hoped, she replied, letting her own power flow free. The ground beneath her feet cracked, stone flowers blooming from the fissures, but hope was always a luxury I couldn't afford. Mordric smiled, cold and sharp. Return with us willingly, and we'll make the pack's deaths quick. Resist, and we'll take our time. The choice is yours, dear student. Astrid felt Fenrir's presence at her back, solid and unwavering. Behind him stood his warriors, ready to die for her if needed. The weight of their loyalty was almost unbearable. She closed her eyes and reached deep, touching the source of her power, the truth she'd hidden even from herself for 3 years. When she opened them again, her irises burned silver white. You want me, Mordric? Her voice echoed with harmonics that made the very stones sing. Then come and take me. But know this, I am no longer the frightened girl who fled your tower. I am the moon-born daughter of starlight and storm, and I will not go quietly into your darkness. The crimson moon pulsed overhead, and the real battle began. The ancient runestone pulsed with otherworldly light as Astrid pressed her palm against its weathered surface. The moment her skin made contact, searing pain shot through her arm, and visions flooded her mind. Memories that weren't her own, knowledge passed down through generations of her bloodline. I see them, she whispered, her voice trembling as the truth unraveled before her. The first of our kind, the witch who bound herself to the shadow realm to save her village from famine. Bjorn growled low, his massive wolf form circling the clearing as the enemy pack drew closer. Through their mate bond, Astrid could feel his desperate urgency, his need to protect her warring with his understanding that she needed these final moments with the stone. The visions intensified. She watched as her ancestor, Helga the Shadowbinder, made a pact with dark forces to ensure her people would never starve again. In exchange for her soul, she gained the power to weave magic into food, to sustain life with supernatural nourishment. But the price had been steep. Every woman in her lineage would carry the curse, their magic growing stronger with each generation until it consumed them entirely. The binding can be broken. Astrid gasped as new images flashed before her eyes, but only at the source, only here, and only by... A howl pierced the night, followed by the clash of bodies and gnashing teeth. Magnus had arrived with his pack, and Bjorn was outnumbered 5 to 1. Astrid felt her mate's pain as claws raked across his ribs, his determination never wavering even as blood darkened his silver fur. She wanted to help him, to abandon the ritual and fight by his side, but the stone wouldn't release her. The ancient magic held her fast, demanding she see the vision through to its end. In the final images, she watched Helga's descendant, a woman who looked exactly like Astrid, standing before this very runestone as shadows writhed around her. The shadows must be fed, Astrid realized with growing horror. Someone has to take Helga's place. Someone has to enter the shadow realm willingly. Another agonized growl from Bjorn made her heart clench. Through their bond, she felt his strength ebbing as Magnus's pack wore him down. They were playing with him, she realized, keeping him alive but helpless while they closed in on her. "Foolish girl," Magnus called out, his voice carrying easily across the clearing even as he remained in wolf form. "Do you think that ancient rock will save you? Your bloodline ends tonight, and with it, the last threat to werewolf supremacy in these lands." Astrid finally understood. Magnus didn't just want to eliminate a potential rival, he feared what she might become. The shadow-binding magic in her blood was growing stronger, just as the visions had shown. If left unchecked, she would eventually become something more powerful than any alpha, something that could reshape the very nature of their world. But there was another way. "I won't let the shadows consume me," she whispered to the stone, feeling its ancient consciousness stirring in response. "And I won't let them have Bjorn either." The runestone's light intensified, and Astrid felt the barrier between realms growing thin. The shadow realm pressed against reality like a hungry beast, eager to claim its due. For centuries it had waited, growing stronger as each generation of her family lived and died without fulfilling the bargain. She could end it here. Step through the veil, take her ancestors' place, and ensure that no future daughter would carry this burden. The shadows whispered seductively, promising her power beyond imagination if she would only surrender herself to their embrace. But then she felt Bjorn's love through their bond. Fierce, unwavering, absolute. He would rather die than live without her, just as she would rather face damnation than lose him. Their connection had changed something fundamental in the ancient magic, added a new variable to an equation that had remained constant for generations. "There is another way," she said aloud, her voice growing stronger with conviction. "Love changes everything, doesn't it? Even curses can be transformed by it." Instead of offering herself to the shadows, Astrid began to weave a new kind of magic. She poured her love for Bjorn into the spell, her gratitude for the pack that had accepted her, her determination to protect the innocent. The runestone trembled under her hands as she rewrote the ancient bargain, not with sacrifice, but with transformation. The shadows shrieked as they felt the change, their hungry darkness meeting something they had never encountered before. Light freely given, love offered without reservation, sacrifice made not from fear but from hope. Magnus snarled in confusion as the very air around them began to shimmer with new possibility. The pack attacking Bjorn faltered, sensing that something fundamental was shifting in the magical currents that governed their world. Astrid smiled as power unlike anything she had ever imagined flowed through her, no longer dark and consuming but bright and generative. The curse was breaking, but not as her ancestors had envisioned. It was becoming something entirely new. The silver blade whistled through the air, missing Astrid's throat by mere inches as she rolled behind the massive oak table. Her heart hammered against her ribs, the familiar weight of her own silver daggers already in her hands. Across the great hall, her sister Ingrid circled like a predator, her pale eyes gleaming with 20 years of accumulated hatred. "Did you really think you could hide forever, little sister?" Ingrid's voice carried the same musical quality Astrid remembered from childhood, now twisted into something cold and mocking. "Playing house with your mongrel alpha, pretending to be someone else?" Magnus stood frozen near the hearth, his massive frame tense with barely contained fury. The other pack members had cleared the hall at his growled command, but Astrid could sense them just beyond the doors, waiting. The scent of their anxiety mingled with the aroma of the evening's feast she had prepared. A feast that now seemed like a lifetime ago. 20 years, Ingrid, Astrid said, rising slowly from behind the table. 20 years you've hunted me. Isn't that enough? Not nearly. Ingrid's smile revealed teeth that seemed too sharp, too white. Not when you cost me everything. My position in the clan, my reputation, my future, all because you couldn't keep your mouth shut about what you saw that night. The memory crashed over Astrid like an icy wave. She had been barely 16 when she witnessed her sister poisoning their father's rival clan leaders during a peace feast. The same gift that now brought her joy in Magnus's kitchen had been Ingrid's weapon, a supernatural ability to infuse any dish with whatever properties she chose. Healing or harm, pleasure or pain, life or death. They were innocent people, Astrid whispered. Children among them. They were obstacles. Ingrid began moving again, her blade catching the firelight. Just like you became, just like your precious wolf will be, Magnus snarled, his human form trembling on the edge of transformation. Touch her, and I'll tear you apart with my bare hands. Ingrid laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Oh, the mighty Alpha speaks. Tell me, beast, do you know what your precious mate really is? What runs in her blood? She's told me everything, Magnus said, but Astrid heard the slight uncertainty in his voice. Has she? Ingrid pulled a small vial from her belt, its contents swirling with an opalescent sheen. Did she tell you about the curse in our bloodline? How our gift always demands a price? How everyone we've ever loved has died screaming? The words hit Astrid like physical blows. She thought of every person who had shown her kindness over the years, every face that had grown pale and still after accepting her food. She had convinced herself it was coincidence, bad luck, anything but the truth. Ingrid now spoke aloud. That's not, Astrid started, but her voice cracked. Isn't it? Ingrid uncorked the vial, and immediately the air grew thick with malevolent energy. Why do you think I could track you so easily? Every death you've caused sends out ripples, little sister. Every poisoned soul calls to its kin. Magnus stepped forward, his eyes blazing gold. Astrid has never harmed anyone here. Her food has healed our wounded, strengthened our pack. For now. Ingrid tilted the vial toward her lips. But the curse always collects its due, usually within the first year of happiness. Tell me, how long have you two been playing at love? Astrid's knees nearly buckled. 10 months. They had been together exactly 10 months. The only way to break the cycle, Ingrid continued, is to embrace what we are, to stop fighting the darkness and let it consume everything we touch. I learned that lesson. Now I'll teach it to you. She drank the vial's contents in one swift motion. The transformation was immediate and horrifying. Ingrid's already pale skin became translucent, revealing dark veins beneath like twisted roots. Her hair bleached white as bone, and when she opened her mouth, black ichor dripped from her lips. I've spent 20 years perfecting this, she hissed, her voice now echoing strangely. Every poison known to gods and men, concentrated and refined. One touch, one drop of my blood, and even your Alpha's supernatural healing won't save him. She lunged forward with inhuman speed, but Astrid was already moving. Years of running, of surviving, had honed her reflexes to a razor's edge. She met her sister's charge head-on, their silver blades clashing in a shower of sparks. Behind them, Magnus roared and began to shift, but Astrid shouted over the sound of rending cloth and bone, "Stay back! Don't touch her!" The sisters circled each other in a deadly dance they had been destined for since childhood. Around them, the great hall that had become Astrid's sanctuary transformed into an arena where only one would leave alive. And as steel met steel in the flickering firelight, Astrid finally understood that running was no longer an option.